Rude Callahan had been halfway through a rare, peaceful Sunday feet up, boots off, coffee cooling on the side table when the knock came. It was a crisp, deliberate sound, not the impatient rapping of a neighbor in a hurry, but measured, like. The person on the other side already knew they'd be answered. He set his mug down with a sigh and pushed himself out of the chair, running a hand through his unkempt hair as he crossed to the door. When it slid open, he found himself looking into a pair of steel-silver eyes, bright as polished metal under the apartment corridor's soft lighting. The woman standing there was unlike anyone he'd met on New Terra Colony Elegant, in a way that seemed out of step with the bustling, practical settlement. Her skin, smooth and pale as moonlight, shimmered faintly as she moved, catching me, light with each subtle shift. Strands of her hair, a mix of silver and gray, were swept back to reveal the clean lines of her face. She wore a floral-patterned dress that clung just enough to hint at the figure beneath, a touch regal without, a trace of ostentation. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said, her voice a low, melodic current that made Rude forget his irritation. "I'm Lila Silverweave. I live next door." Rude found himself straightening. Rude Callahan, engineer. He realized he'd sounded unnecessarily formal, but pressed on. "What can I do for you?" Lila offered a polite smile that somehow felt like an invitation to lean closer. "I hate to impose, but I could use a bit of assistance. A few small tasks around my apartment. Furniture, some lighting, a stubborn entertainment console." He glanced past her at the corridor, then back, at her poised stance, weighing his options. The truth was, he had nothing better to do, and something about her made no seem absurd. "Sure," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Lead the way." Her apartment was spacious, tastefully decorated in a way that blended human. An alien-style sleek silver surfaces soft by warm, textured fabrics, art pieces that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. As they worked, moving a low-slung couch, swapping out a faulty light fixture, and recalibrating her entertainment system, Lila kept up a steady conversation. She spoke of places she'd traveled, rings of ice, so bright they blinded ship sensors. Markets in the asteroid belts of the Vallis cluster, storms that rolled across oceans tinted green under alien suns. "You must be exhausted," she said once they'd finished, her eyes crinkling as she smiled. "Let me thank you properly. I've just baked some cookies. An old family recipe." The scent hit him before she returned from the kitchen suite with something floral, underpinned by a spice he couldn't place. The cookies themselves were small, irregularly shaped, still warm. One bite, and the flavor seemed to bloom on his tongue, rich, complex, and faintly intoxicating. "These are," he searched for the word, "different, in a good way." "I'm glad," she said, settling gracefully into the seat across from him. Her gaze lingered, unhurried. "There are other ways I could show my appreciation." Rude blinked, unsure he'd heard her right. "Other ways?" Her smile deepened, and she leaned forward just enough for the neckline of her dress to shift. "My species ages differently than humans, and I've acquired quite a bit of experience over the years. Experience I enjoy sharing with the right company." He almost choked on his bite, coughed, then found himself laughing softly. "You don't waste time, do you?" Lila's laugh was like crystal chimes. "Life is too short, even when it's long. And I know what I want." Her eyes gleamed as she extended a hand, fingers graceful, inviting. "Unless you're afraid." Rude looked at that hand, then at the silver light playing across her skin. Afraid? Not even close. Something in her tone, in the deliberate way she held herself, made him lean forward without thinking. He took her hand, already wondering just how far this unexpected Sunday was about to go. The next morning, Rude woke to the smell of brewed calf drifting through the hallway. He was still toweling his hair from the shower when his door chime sounded a quick, confident tone that didn't belong to any delivery service. He hit the panel, and the door slid open to reveal a vision that stopped him mid-breath. She was younger than Lila by several decades, but the resemblance was unmistakable. The same luminous silver skin, though hers was overlaid with a faint pearl sheen. Hair like molten platinum spilled over her shoulders, framing a face that managed to be both striking and warmly approachable. Her eyes bright molten steel, fixed on him with curious intensity. "I'm looking for my grandmother, Lila," she said, then paused as her gaze swept over his damp hair, half-buttoned shirt, and bare feet. One brow lifted, and the corner of her mouth curled into the faintest of smirks. "You must be the neighbor." Before he could respond, Lila's door slid open, and she appeared in a flowing silken robe, looking utterly unbothered by the tableau. "Anila, darling, you're early. I wasn't expecting you until next week." Rude stepped back, still holding the towel in one hand. "She's right next door," he said to Anila, though it sounded awkward even to his own ears. Anila's gaze flickered between them, and though she said nothing, her smirk deepened by a shade. "Come in, both of you," Lila said breezily, ushering them into her apartment as though nothing were amiss. "I'll make breakfast." Rude found himself at Lila's elegant dining table a few minutes later, trying not to look as though he was studying Anila. She moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew her own value, setting down her cup and leaning back slightly as Lila brought in a tray. "Grandmother always did have excellent taste," Anila remarked, her voice casual, but her gaze sharp as it settled on Rude. "And I've always believed in sampling life's pleasures before recommending them to others," Lila replied, not missing a beat. Rude nearly choked on his calf, his ears burning. "I should probably, get to work." "Nonsense," Lila said, waving a hand. "I already called your department. Told them you're helping me with urgent maintenance issues today. They were quite understanding." "You did what?" "Oh, don't look so shocked. I sit on the colony's administrative board," Lila said with a mischievous glint. "One of the perks of being a founding investor. Besides, Anila needs someone to show her around the colony. She's considering transferring her research here." "What kind of research?" Rude asked, seizing on the safer subject. "Xenobotanical engineering," Anila replied, her eyes lighting with enthusiasm. "I'm developing hybrid plants that can thrive in multiple colonial environments while enhancing oxygen production and nutrient output." That drew him in. The colony could use that expertise. "We've been having issues with the atmospheric processors lately." Anila leaned forward, interest sharpening. "What kind of issues?" Before he could elaborate, Lila pushed back from the table. "I have a board meeting to attend. You two can continue your fascinating discussion during the tour." Moments later, Rude found himself walking beside Anila through the residential district, still feeling as though he'd been maneuvered into something. Yet watching the way her hair caught the light, the way she spoke with an intensity that made even technical jargon sound musical, he couldn't quite bring himself to mind. Their talk flowed easily, engineering challenges, plant biology, ways. Their disciplines could overlap. By the time they reached the observation deck overlooking the colony's biodomes, the air between them carried a hum of possibility. "When grandmother told me about the handsome human engineer she wanted me to meet, I was skeptical," Anila admitted, her gaze fixed on the domes below. "Finding out about your encounter didn't exactly help." Rude winced. "About that, but," she interrupted, stepping closer, "I'm starting to understand what she saw in you." He felt her hand brush his arm, cool against his skin, sending a line of heat straight to his chest. Before he could speak, her lips found his soft at first, then deepening as if they'd both decided words were unnecessary. when they finally parted, breathless. Her metallic eyes held a spark that promised this was only the beginning. The next day's breakfast in Lila's apartment began like any other sunlight spilling through the panoramic windows. The faint scent of flowers from the terrace garden, drifting in on the climate-controlled breeze. Rude sat across from Manila, still getting used to the fact that what had started as a tour had ended with the two of them sharing not only ideas, but the kind of chemistry that didn't fade. Overnight, Lila entered with her usual theatrical grace, a tray balanced effortlessly in one hand. Today, the cookies gleamed faintly in the light, their golden surfaces flecked with something that caught and refracted tiny sparks of color. "You two seem to be getting along," Lila observed, setting the tray down. "Good, that will make this conversation easier." Anila arched an eyebrow. "What conversation?" "The alignment," Lila said simply, as though that explained everything. Rude looked between them. "Alignment?" Anila set her cup down, her metallic gaze softening. "Our species' reproductive cycle isn't constant like humans. Conception is only possible during specific stellar alignments, gravitational and radiation, patterns from a handful of particular stars. It happens every few years. And one of those alignments?" Rude begins in 3 days. Lila finished for him, her lips curling in satisfaction. "Which is why my dear Anila arrived early. She could feel it starting most. Silver skins do." Rude blinked, trying to catch up. "You're saying," Lila pushed the plate of cookies toward him. "I'm saying these will help. They're an old family recipe, formulated to enhance attraction, deepen emotional connection, and if the compatibility is there, encourage conception. Natural ingredients, nothing harmful. But they only work if the bond is genuine." Anila's skin had taken on a faint rose tint beneath its silvery sheen. "It's not manipulation, Rude. Think of it as amplification. If nothing's there, nothing happens. But if there's a spark," Rude gave a short laugh. "That's one way to describe last night." Her blush deepened, but she didn't look away. Instead, she reached for one of the cookies, broke it in half, and offered the piece to him. "Share it with me." The flavor bloomed instantly, richer and somehow warmer than the ones from before, like sunlight caught in sugar. A strange, pleasant heat curled low in his chest, spilling outward in slow waves. He saw the moment Anila felt it too. Her eyes dilated slightly, and her lips parted just enough for him to notice her quickened breathing. Lila watched them with the satisfied air of a strategist watching a plan fall perfectly into place. "Good. The first effect is subtle. Stronger with proximity, stronger still when you stop dancing around what's obvious between you." That last part was all the prompting Rude needed. He leaned forward, closing the space between them until her cool, silken lips met his. The kiss deepened quickly, urgency and tenderness tangling together, until the world beyond the table ceased to exist. The rest of the day dissolved into something that felt less like a sequence of hours and more like a continuous, unbroken current. They explored each other's worlds, the technical tangles of engineering, the organic complexity of xenobotany punctuated by moments where words failed entirely. By nightfall, the connection between them was no longer a question. It was a fact, anchored in every shared glance, every brush of skin, every silent understanding. And as they lay together afterward, the colony's artificial night humming softly around them, Rude found himself thinking not just about how unexpected this was, but about the strange, certain sense that he'd just stepped into the center of something much larger than himself. Lila's cookies, he realized, weren't just cookies. They were the first move in a game he hadn't known he was playing. And whatever the stakes were, he was already all in. Rude's cum buzzed him awake the next morning, the insistent tone sharp enough to cut through the pleasant haze of Anila's arm draped across his chest. He reached for the device on the nightstand, thumbing it open with a groggy, "Yeah?" His supervisor's voice crackled through, tight with urgency. "Emergency at the atmospheric processors. Main controls are down, sabotage suspected. We need you here now." That pulled him fully awake. He sat up, careful not to jostle Anila too much. "I'm on my way." Anila was already sitting up, silver hair tumbling over one bare shoulder. "I'm coming with you." He began, then stopped himself. "This could be dangerous. That's why I'm coming." Her tone brooked no argument. "If it's the processors, my hybrid plant cultures might be able to replace the bacterial colonies. But we'd have to act fast." 10 minutes later, they were racing through the colony corridors. Outside the processor facility, warning lights pulsed crimson, and the air carried the faint tang of ozone from emergency power reroutes. Inside, chaos reigned, technicians shouting over alarms, hollow displays flashing critical failure notices. Rude went straight to a control console, hands flying over the interface. "They've locked us out of the backups. Whoever did this knew exactly where to hit." Anila was scanning the air intake data, her brow furrowed. "Synthetic virus in the bacterial colonies. They're breaking down faster than the system can compensate." A new voice cut in from behind. "Of course they are," Lila said, striding into the control room in a tailored suit that somehow made her look more dangerous than any security officer. "It's stellar dynamics. They've been trying to force a buyout for months. Now they're offering to rescue the colony at a bargain price." "Over my dead body," Rude growled, pulling up deeper system access protocols. His fingers blurred over the keys, bypassing security layers that would have stalled anyone else for hours. "I can adapt my cultures," Anila said quickly, "but they have to go into the central processing chamber. It's flooded with toxic gas right now." "Then I'll go," Rude said without hesitation. "Not alone," Anila countered. "The plants have to be placed exactly right to integrate with the system. I'm coming with you." "You're pregnant," Rude reminded her, a note of panic in his voice. "Which is exactly why we need to save this colony," she shot back. "Our child's future is here." Lila stepped forward, producing a small, silver-lined container from her bag. "These aren't the usual cookies. Emergency recipe nutrients to protect mother and child during extreme stress. Eat them before you go in." Despite the alarm screaming overhead, Rude huffed a short laugh. "Is there anything those cookies can't do?" "You'd be surprised," Lila said, her eyes narrowing in satisfaction. Suited up, they entered the chamber. The toxic haze reduced visibility to a few meters, every breath through the filters tasting faintly of metal. They worked in tandem, Rude, manually stabilizing the failing systems, while Anila planted her cultures with precision. The heat was oppressive, their suit oxygen dwindling dangerously low. Human determination really is remarkable. Anila's voice crackled through the combs as she adjusted a root cluster. "Well," Rude grunted, wrestling a stuck valve. "Your grandmother's cookies probably helped." Minutes stretched, but finally, Rude watched the displays shift from red to amber to green. The air began to clear as Anila's plants took hold, cycling carbon dioxide back into oxygen dot. When they emerged, Lila was waiting, surrounded by security officers escorting a group of cuffed Stellar Dynamics agents. "Attempted corporate sabotage," she said coolly. "They'll be spending a long time explaining themselves to the colonial court." Later, back in Lila's apartment, Rude held Anila close, one hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "I was scared for you in there," he admitted. "I know," she said softly, "but I've never felt safer than I did with you." From the kitchen, Lila's voice floated in, warm and smug. "I'll bake something special to celebrate saving the colony. And perhaps," she added after a pause, to help with the next step in this little legacy of ours. The colony had barely begun to settle from the processor crisis when Lila summoned Rude and Anila to her apartment. The message had been brief: we need to talk. Bring an appetite. They arrived to find the lights dimmed, the air perfumed with something rich and unfamiliar. Lila stood at the center of the living room, wearing a flowing gown of deep indigo that shimmered like oil under the soft glow. A low table was set with an array of cookies, unlike any Rude had seen before, some faintly iridescent, others with a sheen of gold dusted across their surfaces. This, Lila said with the gravitas of a priestess announcing a rite, is the beginning of the ritual of stellar unity. Rude glanced at Anila. That sounds ceremonial. It is, Anila sighed, her voice quiet but steady. Our people use it to stabilize the genetic heritage of hybrid children. It's rare, almost unheard of, in fact. But with our child, she placed a hand over her abdomen, her eyes locking with his. It could make all the difference. Lila stepped closer, pressing a small plate into Rude's hands. 3 nights, she explained, in a specially prepared chamber. Controlled temperature, atmospheric composition, lighting tuned to your species' neurological rhythms. And these? She gestured to the cookies, to align body and mind. You will focus on each other, on the life you've created, and on the unity of 2 very different lineages. Rude's brow furrowed. You're saying, yes, Lila interrupted without hesitation. Physical intimacy. But not simply for pleasure, though you may find that part rewarding. A ceremony guides emotion and biology together. It strengthens the empathic link between parents and between parents and child. Anila's silver skin seemed to warm in hue, a soft pearlescent blush rising. It's intense, she admitted, but it works. And with a human partner, she hesitated, her lips curving in a half-smile. We have a chance to create something stronger than either species alone. The chamber Lila had prepared was through a side door Rude had never noticed before. Inside, it was like stepping into another world. Walls that shifted subtly between shades of silver and gold, a faint hum in the air like distant music, and a softness to the atmosphere that seemed to ease every muscle. That first night, the cookies tasted like warmth itself, sweet, spiced, and lingering. The effect was immediate. Touch carried weight, every breath seemed shared, and their thoughts began to move in parallel. Rude found himself sensing not just Anila's emotions, but her intent the moment before she moved, the pulse of joy when he traced a line down her shoulder, the protective swell she felt whenever her thoughts brushed their unborn child. By the second night, the bond was undeniable. Their bodies moved as if guided by one rhythm, breaths and heartbeats aligning. The cookies this time sparked a liquid heat that seemed to spill into every nerve ending. Lila, observing quietly from a monitoring console outside, later commented with clinical pride, most couples would be exhausted. Humans, it seems, are remarkably enduring. On the third night, the chamber's lighting shifted to a deep star-flecked indigo, the hum in the air rising in pitch. The final batch of cookies was subtly tart, sending bright sparks along his senses. In that final joining, it was as if they dissolved into each other, no boundaries, no hesitation, only the pulse of shared life between them. When the chamber doors slid open at dawn, Lila greeted them with the satisfied smile of a master craftsman admiring their work. The genetic markers are stabilizing beautifully, she announced, and the empathic bond stronger than I've ever recorded. Rude felt Anila's hand squeeze his, and without speaking, he knew she was thinking the same thing he was. Whatever came next, whether it was joy, danger, or something neither of them could imagine, they would meet it as one. The days after the ritual felt different, not just for Rude and Anila, but for the colony itself. At first, it was subtle. Lights in their quarters seemed to brighten when they were together. The air recyclers in their wing ran more quietly. Even the climate regulators in the biodome maintained a perfect balance without the usual minor fluctuations. Rude noticed it during a routine systems check at the engineering center. Efficiency readings on the atmospheric processors were up. Way up. In fact, everything was running about 10% better than baseline. Then, during a meeting with his tech crew, the numbers spiked another 5% right. At the same moment, Anila entered the room to bring him lunch. That was two. Much to be coincidence. He took the data home and showed Anila that evening, and her eyes lit with realization. "It's us," she said quietly. "The bond we formed in the ceremony. It's not just emotional. Our shared energy is bleeding into the colony's systems. Your human bioelectric field, my species' resonance, they're combining." Before he could respond, Lila swept into the room with a data tablet tucked under her arm. "Already ahead of you, my dears," she said with her usual smugness. "I've had the colony's monitoring software adjusted to smooth out the anomalies. As far as anyone knows, we're just enjoying an exceptional run of good luck." "Luck?" Rude echoed. "We're talking about power generation, life support, water purification. This is real output, not just readings." "Exactly," Leela sighed, settling into a chair. "And that means we need to control it before someone starts asking awkward questions." She produced a small tin from her bag. "These will help. A different recipe infused with micronutrients and compounds that sharpen focus and control. Also," she added with a knowing smile, "they make the process of training much more enjoyable." Training, it turned out, meant finding ways to direct their combined resonance with intent. It started simple holding hands and concentrating on dimming or brightening the lights in the room. Within days, they were able to influence specific systems channeling extra energy into a water recycler, smoothing out a glitch in an environmental control unit. And then there were the side effects. The bond responded most strongly during intimacy, amplifying both their sensations and the energy they put out. The first time they gave in to that draw in the privacy of their quarters, Rude noticed the hum of the building's systems shift in harmony with their rhythm, like the entire structure was breathing with them. Afterward, the engineering logs showed a 15% spike in overall efficiency for nearly 3 hours. Lila's verdict was both clinical and wickedly amused. "Humans," she said, "truly remarkable creatures. I'd suspected your stamina would be a factor, but this..." She shook her head, clearly impressed. Rude and Anila began experimenting, turning their moments of connection into deliberate calibration sessions. It became a strange kind of game, testing how precisely they could channel their shared output. Lights danced, heating vents sighed into perfect equilibrium. Power meters ticked up in gentle waves. They learned to hold it, release it, shape it. Then, one quiet evening on the apartment's terrace, Anila froze mid-laugh, her hand going to her belly. Through the bond, Rude felt it too, a sudden flutter. Not just physical, but emotional. Pure joy radiating from a tiny third presence. "The babies." "Kicking," she said, her voice trembling with awe. Rude rested his hand over hers, the sensation blooming through him in a way he couldn't have imagined. Overhead, the night sky rippled with faint silver light, an aurora shimmer that had no business existing in a controlled dome. From the doorway, Leela's voice was soft, but certain. "It's beginning. The child is already learning to resonate." Rude glanced up at her. "With the colony?" Leela's smile was slow, deliberate. "With everything." The aurora lingered above the dome for hours, a slow ripple of silver and pale gold that bathed the colony in a light both eerie and beautiful. By morning, every cum channel buzzed with speculation. Some called it a rare atmospheric anomaly. Others whispered of divine signs. Only 3 people knew the truth, and they weren't talking. 2 days later, Rude awoke in the pre-dawn hush with a distinct sense that Anila's emotions were not just close, they were flooding through him, urgent and sharp. She stood at the bedroom window, one hand on her belly, silver skin glowing with an intensity he had never seen. "It's time," she said simply, her voice a mixture of wonder and resolve. He was at her side instantly, steadying her as a pulse of energy surged through their bond. It wasn't just her, he felt it too. The baby's awareness, bright and insistent, pushing toward the world. Lila was ready for them. Somehow she always was. When they entered the medical bay, she'd already arranged the room lights dimmed to a warm gold, air balanced for both human and silver skin biology, soft harmonic tones humming from concealed emitters. Beside her sat a covered tray, from which drifted the faint, unmistakable scent of her cookies. "These," she said, lifting the lid to reveal shimmering, starlight-dappled confections, "are my final recipe, designed for this moment. They'll align your breathing, heart rate, and resonance, giving the child the smoothest entry possible." Rude and Anila each took one, the taste washing over them like a rush of sunlight through water. Instantly, their bond deepened, sensations merging into a single shared current. Pain, joy, urgency, hope all flowing in perfect balance. The birth itself became something beyond either of them. They didn't just hold hands, they were hands and heartbeats and breaths joined through. A bond so complete that Rude knew the exact moment their child's eyes first opened. As Anila pushed through the final effort, the energy from all 3 of them surged outward, resonating through the colony's systems in a harmonic wave. Overhead, the aurora blazed to full brilliance, silver and gold cascading across the artificial sky. In every home, light panels warmed, water recyclers ran sweet and pure, air systems purred at peak efficiency. It was as though the entire colony took a collective, perfect breath. And Rael was there, tiny, luminous, his skin predominantly silver, but laced with faint gold veining that caught the light like sunlight on water. His eyes opened to reveal a startling blend of human warmth and silver skin luminescence. His first cry sent a ripple of power through the room, and every system monitor in the bay ticked briefly to maximum. "Rael," Anila whispered, the silver skin word for starlight. "A perfect name," Lila said, cradling him for a moment before placing him back in Anila's arms. Her expression softened, and for once, there was no teasing glint in her eyes, only pride and quiet satisfaction. "You've done it. We've done it." Later, in her private study, she called them both in. The walls were lined with artifacts and data cores, each bearing the weight of decades, even centuries of accumulation. "It's time you knew the full truth," she said. "I've spent a lifetime preparing for this moment. My investments, my holdings, my connections, they're all yours now. More than that, the recipes, the techniques, the knowledge of how to thrive when others would see us fail. I chose you, Rude, because I knew humanity's adaptability could merge with our heritage in a way no other species could. Rael is proof." Rude swallowed hard. "So from the moment you knocked on my door," Lila's lips curved, "I planned the possibility. But love was your doing." That night, as Rael slept between them under the glow of a soft aurora, Rude and Anila shared one more of Lila's final cookies. The taste carried every memory, every trial, every victory. And through their bond, they both knew the same truth: this was just the beginning. Above the colony, the aurora shimmered on, a living promise of what humanity and silver skin could build together.